Hello, welcome to Key Philosophies. Today, I will be going over rays and offices. So these are like positions, so to speak. So if you could imagine, some people who might be overly theological, be careful with this. Just bear with me. That this heavenly mother and father and holy child trinity concept could have instances where these sorts of advanced souls are born into the human scheme, and we then see a transition of humankind, a shift, a a polar paradigm shift from this. And sometimes you'll see in times where in history this has happened. So, in this second part of the introduction of Michael Topper's introduction to Matrix 4, it goes into these rays and offices shortly after here. So, I will begin. After all, the entire matrix of exposure regarding the shadow government, hidden technologies, alternative worlds, beings from the stars, and interior dimensions reveals the functional existence of an unknown universe. That revelation does not convey, as its primary importance, so much the alarming intelligence of your secret betrayal and ongoing exploitation as the greater knowledge of your continual existence in parallel with a non ordinary, unknown reality, the nature of which leaks into, impinges upon, and affects everything belonging to the blindered byways of the known. While the mass is ever preoccupied, then, with anecdotal and incident about that alternate universe, apparently content to tell tales of things unseen, those original explorers, sufficiently astute in the first place to detect that presence beyond the mapped out boundary line of the known, just beyond the misty limit of the meridional comfort zone, conserved the clarity of that intent and drew them there. They maintained the steadiness of the eye, to recognize that the current challenge presented by the fact of that larger reality takes its bearing in the question as to how to map such reality, how to make this formidable new world territory familiar, turn the unknown to the knowable, to permissible limits, in ongoing steadiness of that opened eye. And the very formidability of that proposed task provokes the further necessary question: who is there to do it? Who will give the sure knowledge, understanding, and wisdom, and true insight regarding these things that are merely anecdotal to the mass of third density, Earth consciousness, regular people, you and me? Is it the space aliens we find inhabiting this territory who will do it? They're going to come with the answers for you. Is it the multiple channeled sources beaming in as of late from zones unknown? Many there are who jump to the affirmative will willy nilly when these solutions are proposed. After all, they are reason, using the term lightly, of course. These things are from that unknown land. Therefore, they ought to be best qualified to tell us about it, describe its features, teach us its rules, and so on. Equipped us to travel freely in its field, and so on. However, there are those already light enough on their own to understand these sources, present precisely in terms of unfamiliar magnitudes that are in question to begin with, these channeled sources, right? How can one accept tutelage, albeit very tentatively, from the lion whose lair you would negotiate? How wise is it to unquestioningly accept riding instructions from the very wild roan you would ride? Then what's the alternative, MT? Surely we feel more comfortable getting our steering from someone who's here on the life raft along with us over these dark waters, rather than getting on instructions from something interdeterminate or indeterminate. Swimming alongside the boat. But how may we be taught about these deeps themselves? By someone with whom we share the familiarity of the raft? Since he is precisely on the raft, and is therefore a third stage, earth-focused form of consciousness, just like ourselves. What would such flesh folk know of the briny deep? However, the flaw in the perception here is precisely the leveling idea that everyone sharing the life raft with you, i.e. decidedly incarnate in the flesh body of third density style earth consciousness, is ipso facto a specimen of third density consciousness alone, that is on par with yourself and therefore no more qualified to teach the deep ways than you are. This flaw in perception has led to two equally invalid forms of reasoning. The first, the commonality of the shared incarnate state makes everyone automatically a democratic equal in terms of right or authority. To expound upon the mystifying things, thus, there are those usually found today on the New Age circuit or advertising in whole life who presume themselves adequate to task of explaining, peddling, or pontificating on the mysteries by default, since to them there appears no one sharing a birthday suit, less blinded than themselves, i.e. it's safe to say, for who is there to say nay? And then number two, secondly, no one sharing a flesh vehicle with and including yourself is qualified to teach mysteries of the higher, an angle which is equally of democratic comfort. Indeed, the modern trend is to encourage such enforced egalitarianism in the form of anti-cultism. The thrust of this popular conflagration is governmentally fired and fanned by the compliant media. Governmental arson in this case is easy to understand. The power elite does not want the competition of real teachers or teachings. Plain and simple, if the government wants you to find out about the non-ordinary reality with which it's had commerce for years, it will introduce and condition you to it its way, and a dose of thallium dessert to anyone who sees it differently. Disabuse or deprogrammed of the notion that any embodied being may brief you on the greater wisdom, except perhaps a special case, past tense only exception, such as Jesus, of course, who was very popular with the government of his day. You are left wide open to be introduced to extraplanetary or transdimensional denizens, selectively approved behind the scenes and represented as your providential saviors from all that sudden welter of woes fatefully unsolvable within your failing familiar context, just whose woes ensured in their insolubility by a power elite polluting your living space and then legislating your last line of defense nutrients out from underneath you. Welcome to the fourth density, slave state style. The lie in the above litany of conventional wisdoms is exposed in the significant knowledge that beings of constitutionally higher density, correspondence, or rapport do share and have to some extent always shared your fleshly estate. And they've done so for two interlocked reasons. Since beings from the fourth to sixth density have shared and do share the third density condition with you, the reason for their doing so vary in proportionate priority according to the effective density correlation of the given being. So now on to those rays and offices I was talking about at the onset. The fourth to fifth density beings elect to share a third density condition, first of all, because the unique inertial resistance of screened third density limit acts as an intensified catalytic agent for progressively transcendent awakening. The rationale is that third density acts like a low set springboard. The higher the dive onto the board, from the beginning, mid, or late fourth density, etc., the greater the repercussive spring, and consequently the higher return loft. Thus, third density acts as an initiatory expediter for taking degrees of awakened consciousness beyond those presently enjoyed at the higher state, but less catalytic levels. The secondary motivation for fourth to fifth density beings is that of serving the awakening of the third density beings amongst whom they'd take incarnation, as the very means of accelerating their own knowledge, understanding, and wisdom. For the comparatively few sixth density beings electing to take third density incarnation, the principal motivation is that of teaching awakening third density beings, of expediting the further initiations of incarnate fourth and fifth density beings, and secondarily of serving the acceleration of their own advance to the degree of oversoul consciousness, which begins in the mid sixth density. And although it's fair to say that many of these constitutionally higher density beings descend originally from either space-time or time-space loci similar or identical to the ones from which saucer folks, beam, and channeled entities broadcast respectively, it must be noted as a cautionary fact that for those pledged by long-term initiatory contract to repeat third density incarnations, there is proportionately less correspondence of elusive affinity or identity with those high density contexts in and of themselves. How's the UFO problem there? From that perspective. The alien issue. Of course, we don't call them UFOs anymore. Only conspiracy theorists call them that. Owing to the commitment of their initiatory pledge, such higher density beings routinely incarnating in third density develop the useful viewpoint of a dual empathy, in keeping with conciliatory requirements of their given office. This dual empathy is more or less pronounced, more or less balanced between high and low densities as a teaching function according to which office it is they represent. The offices of which we speak are three in number. Those familiar with the theosophical material of Alice Bailey will recognize the recitation of offices, and for what it's worth, may note MT concurs on the validity of those posts as cited therein. So you'll see it's in agreement with Madame Blavatsky and the theosophical works of Alice Bailey. The first office is, well, at least in that part, the first office is the cosmic crown of the Manu. The cosmic crown of the Manu. And universal avataric function correlated with the ray of will. The second office is that of the Bodhisattva, definitionally exemplified by Jesus and Buddha historically, correlated with the ray of love and wisdom. The third office is that of Mahakahin, correlated with the ray of ceremonial magic, i.e. the ray of intelligent activity, associated with the Akashic dimension of being and the principle of mother. This would be the Crowley stuff. Mother has historically remained unembodied in terms of an avataric representation until now, so that the office has again historically been filled exclusively by a male ambassador to the post. Mahakahin remains to this day the designation of the male counterpart to the ray of intelligent activity. Mother is proper title for the female embodiment of that ray, and only that female embodiment technically qualifies for the designation, since she alone fulfills a specific mind-body function with respect to requirements of the office. The later office is indeed the most deeply terrestrialized, that of the Mahakahan. Of offices, its sacred representatives or incarnations take embodiment more fully than the representatives of the other two. Thus, one may expect that the quotient of shared empathy between higher and lower densities is greatest of all in the persons of the Mahakahan and the Mother, and that the fulfillment of their particular offices has very much to do with this quality of shared empathy. More on the 3 theosophical offices in the excerpt in the introduction to the Mother. Although there are usually 1 or at most 2 complete and authentic embodiments of each or any office at any one time on the Earth plane. All incarnations into 3rd density projected from the higher densities, whether 4th, 5th, or 6th, take place under the auspice of one of those 3 rays. For example, though the Mahakahan and the Mother are embodied at this time, thus completely fulfilling the office, numbers of other beings from 4th, 5th, and 6th densities presently take embodiment under implicit aegis of their office, and therefore serve, with or without awakened knowledge as such, in any given case, in the form of functionaries on behalf of the ray of intelligent activity, that first office. Or no, wait, that's the 3rd. They are, as it were, Mother's little helpers. Mother's little helpers. Thus, from 4th, 5th, and 6th densities do indeed come, in hierarchic order, authentic teachers, adepts, masters, and avatars, pertaining variously to the offices of Manu, Bodhisattva, and Mahakahan. The Mahakahan is, for example, master of the adepts for the ray of intelligent activity, or ceremonial magic ray, spelled with a K. Treatise on Cosmic Fire, Alice Bailey. Be some reference material for you there. It is given that the Bodhisattva, love wisdom, learns from the Manu, will, and the Mahakahan, mother, intelligent activity, learns from the Bodhisattva. Thus, their respective offices tend to manifest historically in an overlapping succession of phases mirroring this hierarchy, each bringing the change initiated by the Manu at that time, deeper with the progressive indelibility into the physical sphere, toward eventually expediting a wholesale 4th density transition of that sphere. So, like an entire update for the whole thing. The aforementioned Meher Baba of Pune, India, fulfilled the modern office of Manu for the present aeonic transition. This is an assertion which, nonetheless, we shall demonstrate with the body of our text, Motto in the Lotto, which will come later, to a degree sufficiently suggestive for those prepared to identify the characteristic marks and signatures. In fulfillment of that office, he prepared the way for the complementary modern embodiments of the Bodhisattva function. Baba died in 1969, and those contemporary heart functionaries began almost immediately thereafter, in the early 70s, to perform their teaching work. One such functionary was murdered. The other is at the present time decommissioned, but neither eventually transpired until sufficiently ground sufficient ground was prepared for advent of the final functionaries of the triune spiritual offices, the Mahakahan, and the first time awakened embodiment of the Mother. Events relative to the respective outcome of the Bodhisattva emissaries were concluded by the end of the 80s. Activation of the office of Mahakahan, the ray of ceremonial magic or intelligent activity, and the advent of the planetary mother occurred in overlapping at approximately the same time, late in the 80s and the early 90s. Yes, I know, very somewhat confusing and mystical, but as you go on, some of it makes more sense. And some of it didn't make sense to me until I read a lot more into a lot of other material. But you are where you are. So those were the rays and offices. Let's see, we might have time to go into this next piece here. Well, I might just do this in another video because it would make the video shorter, right? That makes sense. I'm sure I'm too long-winded already. But yeah, what do you think about this idea of rays and offices? I think it's pretty interesting. But it kind of relates to this idea of, oh, the Maitreya is going to come and, the Antichrist and all that. But, you know, might there be some different ways to understand things than through some dualistic tract of consciousness that's been, controlling the occult and telling us how to think about it for a long time, So, I don't know. You tell me in the comments section. Please like and subscribe. Thanks for enjoying my video, viewer and viewers. If there's two of you, thank you. And hopefully I'll see you next time for Why the Crown of False Knowledge. Always dreads this words. This word, not this words. Anyways, thank you. Have a good day.